What's up again there, guys? Brian, the Three Topics Gamer here to bring you another episode of my weekly Q&A show, top people's questions, where I answer the majority of questions that have been sent to me over the past week. This particular episode, I only had about 4 questions that I thought were video appropriate. The rest of them, I decided, they were a little bit too simple, so I decided to answer them in the comment section of the last video. So if you don't hear them in this video, that's where you need to go in order to see your answer. So, starting us up with the first question coming from Shadow Jesus Gaming, and you want to know, if Batman existed in the Star Wars universe, do I think he'd be a Jedi, Sith, Grey Jedi, or Dark Jedi? Here's the problem. We don't even know if Bruce Wayne would be Force sensitive. I mean, just because you throw Batman in Star Wars doesn't mean he's guaranteed to use the Force. I mean, there's a reason why certain characters can use the Force and others can't. But let's just say hypothetically he could. Well, then you'd have to determine his strength of Force sensitivity. But let's just say he's borderline average. Okay, would he be a Jedi? Hell no. Do I think he'd be a Sith? I don't know. Grey Jedi is a little bit too between both worlds. Dark Jedi, that seems closest. Here's the thing about, here's the problem with Batman. Batman is not necessarily an entirely good person. He can be a real asshole, and there's a lot of darkness in him. So he could never follow the rules of the Jedi. I mean, his whole mentality is based upon vengeance, and revenge is not a virtue that the Jedi support. I mean, they're very much against that. So that very much puts him very, very distant from the Jedi. He really could be more of a Sith, but he's not power hungry. And that's the tricky part. And the difference with Grey Jedi is that they believe in balance. And I guess that's okay, except that puts him in conflict. So, to be honest, I think he probably would fall into the category of a Dark Jedi. He's someone that's willing to do bad. Put it like this, he would be something similar to like a Darth Revan, in which he has good intentions, but he's willing to make the hard choices, even though they're bad. Which I think in that case is kind of a Dark Jedi. I mean, he's not out for power, but he's definitely not all for good, because that's not what his morals and mentality is built upon. So yeah, I guess my choice would be a Dark Jedi. Next question comes from Santico Scarpino, and you want to know, do I think a good cast of characters can at least make an otherwise mediocre plot better? The problem with having a good cast is, even if you had a good cast of characters, if you don't have a good enough plot, then there's not much they can do. Your characters are very much limited to what the plot provides them. So really, the plot is, the better the plot, the more flexible your characters can be, and the better that they can perform. It would take a very, very skilled writer to use really good characters in a mediocre plot, because if it's mediocre or it's not that great, that's tough to do. That makes it hard to connect with the characters. I think it just depends on the writer. I don't think it's per se possible, but I think it just depends on the type of plot you're trying to tell. Like, if it's something generic, then there's not much you can do, because it'll just be very, very predictable, regardless of how good your characters in the cast are. So it's a little bit fuzzy. Next question comes from Alexia Smith, and you want to know, how strong do I think Nero is now that Devil May Cry 5 is out, and do I think he compares to twin Dante and Virgil? Okay, well, he's definitely stronger, but do I think he's as strong as Dante and Virgil? No. Because to his core, he's only 25% demon. And some would say, well, he stopped Dante and Virgil, and he was able to beat Virgil, but here's the problem with that idea. You have to remember, Dante and Virgil had just worn each other down at that point. So technically, I don't think Nero beat Virgil. He beat a weakened Virgil, who's maybe running at maybe 50%. I certainly don't think Nero could take down Dante or Virgil if they were at the top of their game. I just don't believe that. But he's definitely a lot stronger than he was, say, in Devil May Cry 4. But is he on their level, especially since they've now gotten that new amp with their new Sin transformations? No. He probably would perform well against them in their base form Devil Trigger forms, but not their maximum. And the last question of the episode comes from All-Star Gamer Punk, and you want to know, morally, what do I think of WWE's 10-year deal with Saudi Arabia? Morally. Well, okay, this is where I'm coming from. Saudi Arabia is a very, very controversial country, but here's my viewpoint on it. What they do over there is their problem. I mean, what I'm going to say is going to sound controversial and it might rub people the wrong way, but this is just how I feel about issues in other countries. I'm not so worried about them. I mean, it's horrible things happen in other countries, but it's not for me to judge because I'm not over there. It's not my country. I'm concerned about the things happening in my own country, and we have enough problems as it is. I mean, if we didn't have any problems and we had the time to, want to help other countries with their problems, that's something else. But I mean, that's not the case, and I don't think that's ever been the case. And when you start putting yourself out there and want to start fixing the problems in other countries, then those issues become your issues, and then you have even more problems. So now you have to deal with the problems of your own country, and then you have to deal with the problems of the problems of other countries. And if you do that in too many places, you stretch yourself out too thin, and then when something serious happens in your own country, which very much could happen, you just don't have the resources. I mean, you'd be forced to pull back, but then you've made an obligation to want to help those countries. It's like, well, we can't do that because we're dealing with our own things. So it would just be best to just not deal with those problems. I mean, it's horrible, but if people want those problems in other countries fixed, then the people should rise up and fix those problems themselves. I mean, start a revolution if you want. I mean, that's happened throughout history. But when it comes to WWE, it's simply business. That's what it comes down to. Vince McMahon wants money, and Saudi Arabia has offered him a lot of money. And there's definitely some superstars working for WWE that don't want to perform in Saudi Arabia, and that's perfectly their choice. That's fine. But when it's all said and done, it's all about money. It's nothing personal. It's just business. And in business, you have to make decisions that are very uncomfortable, and some of your employees aren't going to agree with, but you have to think about the health and the stability of your company. And if it requires you have to do some pretty shady things, well, that's what you're going to do. I think that anyone put in a certain position, would make similar decisions. I mean, some people might, but I think most people would if you want your company to survive. So, morally, you know what? From what I've heard, they like wrestling over there, and I think WWE's probably the only one, money-wise, that'd be willing to pull it off. I mean, I'm sure there's other wrestling businesses that might try, but I don't think they have the reputation that WWE has, despite them kind of being in a downfall right now. But heck, if they want to do it, go for it. So, yeah, that's just how I feel about it. And that'll do it for this particular episode. I want to thank the 4 of you that managed to send your questions in for the video, as well as all the other questions that were answered in the comment section of the last video. If you have any more questions you'd like me to answer in next week's episode, be sure to type them in the comments down below. But make sure you get them into me roughly before Wednesday around noon before I start filming the next episode. And also, if you want to increase your chances of having them added to the video, either have them be very interesting or just have a little bit more depth. Otherwise, I will just answer them in the comments down below. So, like always, I'd like to thank all of you guys for watching. You're awesome, and I will see you next time.